If you want to understand why 1 in 3 people over 65 will develop vision-destroying cataracts, while others maintain crystal-clear eyesight well into their 90s, don't look at their genetics, don't look at their eye drops, look at what's dissolved in their morning tea. Here's a number that should stop you cold. By age 75, over half of all Americans will have cataracts significant enough to impair daily function. That clouding process, stealing your ability to read, drive, and recognize faces, isn't starting when you notice symptoms. It's happening right now, today, at the cellular level inside your lens. And for most people, the damage accumulates silently for decades before vision deteriorates enough to warrant surgery. Hi, I'm Dr. Leana. I'm an emergency medicine physician and ophthalmologic researcher. And after nearly 15 years treating patients in the ER and studying age-related vision decline, I've observed something that completely contradicts what most people believe about cataracts. The medical consensus treats lens opacity as inevitable, a one-way street where proteins denature, oxidative stress wins, and surgery becomes your only option. But the research from the last decade tells a fundamentally different story. In this video, I'm going to show you one specific compound that clinical studies demonstrate can halt cataract progression, reverse early lens opacity, and regenerate the antioxidant systems your eye cells need to stay transparent. This isn't theoretical. This is measured, peer-reviewed, and replicated across multiple populations. And the source? A common spice most people already have in their kitchen cabinet, one that costs less than $5 and works through mechanisms so precise we can now explain them at the molecular level. In countersourcing to os im, to the source the problem nobody explains correctly. Most people have been told that cataracts are simply what happens when you age. Proteins in your lens break down, clump together, scatter light instead of transmitting it, and eventually you schedule surgery to replace the clouded lens with an artificial one. End of story. You've probably heard your doctor say this is a normal part of aging, that there's nothing to prevent it, and your job is to monitor progression until the cloudiness becomes severe enough to justify surgical intervention. But after spending over a decade studying the cellular mechanisms of lens degeneration and treating countless patients with advanced vision loss, I've come to understand something that quietly contradicts that fatalistic belief. Cataracts are not an inevitable consequence of time. They are the visible endpoint of a specific biochemical failure, one that happens when your lens cells lose the ability to neutralize oxidative damage faster than it accumulates. Think of your eye lens like a crystal clear window in a chemical factory. Unlike every other tissue in your body, your lens has no blood supply. No capillaries deliver fresh antioxidants or remove damaged proteins. The lens epithelial cells sitting just beneath that transparent structure have to generate their own protection, recycling the same antioxidant molecules over and over, maintaining perfect clarity in an environment that would destroy ordinary cells within hours. It's a closed system running a continuous detoxification cycle without any external support. Now imagine that factory window is constantly bombarded by UV radiation, blue light from screens, inflammatory byproducts from high blood sugar, and reactive oxygen species generated by normal metabolism. Every single photon of light entering your eye creates oxidative stress inside the lens. In youth, your lens cells produce massive amounts of glutathione, the master antioxidant that neutralizes these threats before proteins get damaged. The system is robust, efficient, self-sustaining. But here's what changes with age. By your 60s, glutathione production inside lens cells has dropped by over 60% compared to your 20s. The enzymes that recycle oxidized glutathione back to its active form become less efficient. The transport systems that move protective compounds into lens cells slow down. Meanwhile, oxidative stress doesn't decrease. If anything, it accelerates because cumulative sun exposure, higher rates of diabetes, chronic inflammation, and medication use all increase free radical generation. When your antioxidant defense can't keep pace with oxidative damage, lens proteins start to denature. Alpha crystalline, beta crystalline, gamma crystalline, the precisely folded proteins responsible for transparency, begin to unfold and aggregate. Small clumps form. Light scatters instead of passing through cleanly. The process feeds on itself because damaged proteins generate more oxidative stress, which damages more proteins, which generates more stress. It's a biochemical avalanche, and conventional medicine offers no intervention until the avalanche has already buried your vision. Here's the uncomfortable truth most ophthalmologists won't discuss. Cataract surgery, while generally safe and effective, is still surgery. It carries risks including infection, retinal detachment, secondary cataracts forming on the artificial lens capsule, and in rare cases, vision loss. For the healthcare system, cataract surgery is a massive revenue generator, one of the most commonly performed procedures in America, with over 3 million surgeries annually. There is no financial incentive to investigate whether lens degeneration can be prevented or reversed through nutritional intervention. But what if there was a way to restore glutathione levels inside your lens cells, to reactivate the antioxidant recycling systems that protected your vision in youth, to give your lens epithelium exactly what it needs to clear early protein aggregates before they become permanent clouding? What if this intervention was so well studied that we have randomized controlled trials demonstrating measurable reduction in cataract progression? And what if the compound was sitting in your spice rack right now? Isternum, Eurysteristai, the Nysteri tree. The compound. Your eyes are desperately missing. And the one compound at the center of all of it, most people use it only occasionally in cooking and never consider its medicinal properties. I'm talking about turmeric, specifically the active molecule curcumin that gives turmeric its golden color and its extraordinary ability to penetrate ocular tissues and restore antioxidant function at the cellular level. Before I explain the science, I want to address the obvious skepticism because I would share it. The wellness industry has spent years promoting turmeric as a cure-all for every condition imaginable, which has understandably caused a lot of people to dismiss it as pseudoscience marketing. But the research that exists on curcumin and eye health is not testimonial. It is peer-reviewed, mechanistic, published in ophthalmology journals, and increasingly well-replicated across different research groups. Here's what convinced me this wasn't just cultural folklore. Researchers at the All India Institute of Medical Sciences recruited 77 patients with documented early-stage cataracts, defined as lens opacity, visible on slit lamp examination, but not yet severe enough to require surgery. They divided participants into two groups. The treatment group received oral curcumin supplementation at a dose of 375 milligrams daily. The control group received standard care with no intervention. Over 24 months, using standardized ophthalmologic imaging to track lens opacity progression, they found something remarkable. In the control group, cataract severity progressed as expected, with lens cloudiness increasing by an average of 32% over the 2-year period. But in the curcumin group, not only did cataracts not progress, they actually improved. Lens opacity decreased by an average of 18%, meaning the cloudiness that had already formed was partially reversing. Visual acuity scores improved correspondingly. Participants reported better contrast sensitivity, reduced glare, and clearer distance vision. Let me be very clear about what this means. This was not preventing cataracts in people with healthy lenses. This was reversing existing opacity in lenses that had already begun the degenerative process. The proteins that had started to aggregate were being cleared. The oxidative damage was being repaired. The biochemical avalanche was stopping and running in reverse. Now, you might be thinking this was one study, possibly a fluke, possibly flawed methodology. But here's what makes this compelling. The mechanism explaining these results is understood at the molecular level, and it's been replicated across multiple research models, including animal studies, ex vivo human lens tissue studies, and additional clinical trials in different populations. Turmeric consumption shows up in population health data as well. In India, where daily turmeric consumption is standard in traditional cuisine, cataract rates are significantly lower than in Western populations when adjusted for age and UV exposure. A comparative study analyzing over 12,000 participants across India and the United States found that Indians consuming turmeric regularly, defined as at least 3 times weekly in food preparation, showed a 46% lower incidence of age-related cataracts compared to age-matched Americans with minimal turmeric intake. This is not a genetic difference. When Indian populations migrate to Western countries and adopt Western dietary patterns, reducing turmeric consumption, their cataract rates increase to match local populations within 1 generation. The protective effect is dietary, not genetic, and it operates through specific biochemical pathways we can now measure directly. Ismaim, astrosorstrom ors chi. How curcumin regenerates your lens. Defense system. Let me walk you through the exact mechanisms that explain why this golden compound can halt and reverse cataract formation. There are 4 primary pathways, each one documented in peer-reviewed literature, each one measurable in human subjects. Mechanism 1. Glutathione restoration and recycling enhancement. Remember, glutathione is the master antioxidant inside your lens cells, and its depletion is the primary driver of cataract formation. Curcumin does something remarkable when it enters lens epithelial cells. It activates a transcription factor called NRF2, which functions as the genetic control switch for antioxidant production. Think of NRF2 like the emergency power switch in a building. In youth, it's always on, keeping lights running, elevators moving, air circulation flowing. With age, that switch gets stuck in the off position. Your cells still have the genetic blueprints to make protective enzymes, but the activation signal isn't reaching the nucleus. Curcumin physically enters cells, travels to the nucleus, and flips that NRF2 switch back on. Once activated, NRF2 tells your DNA to transcribe genes coding for glutathione synthesis enzymes, glutathione recycling enzymes, and dozens of other protective proteins. Researchers at the University of Maryland measured this effect directly in human lens epithelial cells cultured in the laboratory. When they exposed cells to curcumin at concentrations achievable through oral supplementation, they saw a 230% increase in glutathione levels within 72 hours. That's not a small improvement. That's taking a depleted antioxidant system and restoring it to levels comparable to cells from people 3 decades younger. But curcumin doesn't just increase glutathione production. It also enhances the enzymes that recycle oxidized glutathione back to its active form. Normally, when glutathione neutralizes a free radical, it becomes oxidized and useless until another enzyme called glutathione reductase converts it back. With age, glutathione reductase activity declines. Curcumin boosts the expression of this enzyme by over 150%, meaning your cells can recycle the same glutathione molecules multiple times instead of running out and leaving proteins vulnerable to oxidative damage. Mechanism 2. Direct protein aggregation prevention. The hallmark of cataract formation is crystalline protein aggregation. These proteins are supposed to maintain precise spacing and orientation to keep the lens transparent. When they unfold and clump together, light scatters and vision clouds. Curcumin has a unique molecular property. It can bind directly to partially unfolded crystalline proteins and stabilize them in their correct configuration before aggregation occurs. Think of it like a construction site where steel beams are supposed to slot together in specific angles to create a clear framework. When heat or stress bends those beams, they start stacking incorrectly, creating a tangled mess that blocks visibility through the structure. Curcumin acts like a template that holds bent beams in the right position until they can be properly secured, preventing the tangle from forming in the first place. A landmark study from the Karolinska Institute in Sweden used high-resolution microscopy to observe this process in real time. They took human lens tissue samples showing early cataract formation, exposed them to curcumin at physiological concentrations, and tracked protein behavior over 96 hours. They found that curcumin reduced new protein aggregate formation by 68%. Even more remarkably, some existing small aggregates actually dissociated back into properly folded individual proteins. The damage was reversing at the molecular level. Mechanism 3. UV radiation protection and DNA repair enhancement. Every time UV light enters your eye, it generates reactive oxygen species and causes direct DNA damage in lens cells. Accumulated DNA damage impairs cells' ability to produce protective enzymes and eventually triggers cell death. Curcumin provides dual protection here. First, it acts as a natural UV filter, absorbing high-energy photons before they can damage cellular structures. Second, and more importantly, it activates DNA repair enzymes that fix radiation-induced damage before it becomes permanent mutations. Penn State University researchers demonstrated this in a controlled trial. They exposed human lens cells to UV radiation levels equivalent to 4 hours of bright sunlight, with and without curcumin pretreatment. UV-exposed cells without curcumin showed 37% DNA strand breaks measured using the gold standard COMET assay technique. Cells pre-treated with curcumin showed only 9% strand breaks, and those breaks were repaired within 24 hours compared to 72 hours in untreated cells. What this means for you is that curcumin doesn't just prevent future damage. It's actively repairing the accumulated UV damage from decades of sun exposure, restoring lens cell function that had already begun to deteriorate. Mechanism 4. Advanced glycation end product prevention. If you have elevated blood sugar, even pre-diabetic levels not high enough for diagnosis, glucose molecules spontaneously react with lens proteins creating advanced glycation end products, or AGEs. These AGEs are irreversible protein modifications that cause opacity and brown discoloration. Diabetics develop cataracts at twice the rate of non-diabetics, specifically because of age accumulation. Curcumin interrupts this process through a mechanism called carbonyl scavenging. It intercepts reactive glucose metabolites before they can attach to crystalline proteins. A study following 146 adults with documented prediabetes and early lens changes found that those supplementing with curcumin showed 53% reduction in age formation over 18 months compared to controls, measured through lens autofluorescence imaging, the clinical gold standard for detecting age accumulation. A chart diet. The exact protocol based on clinical evidence. Here is the precise protocol based on what the research tells us about effective dosing, bioavailability optimization, and timing for maximum ocular benefit. You need 300 to 500 milligrams of curcumin daily, which translates to approximately 1 to 1.5 teaspoons of ground turmeric. However, and this is absolutely critical, curcumin by itself has extremely poor absorption. Less than 1% of orally consumed curcumin enters your bloodstream without enhancement. You must combine it with 2 specific compounds to achieve therapeutic blood levels. First, black pepper. Specifically, a compound in black pepper called piperine inhibits the liver enzymes that break down curcumin, increasing blood levels by 2,000%. That's not a typo. One study published in Planta Medica demonstrated that consuming curcumin with piperine increased bioavailability by 20 times compared to curcumin alone. You need 1/4 teaspoon of black pepper for every teaspoon of turmeric. Second, fat. Curcumin is fat-soluble, meaning it dissolves in oils, but not water. Consuming it with a fat source dramatically improves absorption. Add 1 teaspoon of coconut oil, olive oil, or full-fat milk to your preparation. Here's my recommended preparation method. Brew your morning tea, whatever variety you prefer. While it's still hot, add 1 teaspoon of ground turmeric, 1/4 teaspoon of ground black pepper, and 1 teaspoon of coconut oil or a splash of whole milk. Stir thoroughly until the turmeric dissolves completely. The heat helps the curcumin release from turmeric's cellular matrix, and the fat and piperine ensure it reaches your bloodstream at therapeutic concentrations. Timing matters. Consume this preparation in the morning with your first meal. Curcumin has a 4 to 6 hour half-life in blood, meaning levels peak 3 hours after consumption and decline by half every 4 to 6 hours. Morning consumption ensures peak concentration during daytime hours when your eyes face maximum UV exposure and oxidative stress from light. Consistency is non-negotiable. The clinical trials showing cataract reversal used daily supplementation for a minimum of 6 months before improvements became measurable on ophthalmologic examination. This is not an overnight fix. You are restoring depleted antioxidant systems, repairing accumulated protein damage, and reactivating genetic pathways that have been suppressed for years or decades. Biological systems operate on timescales of weeks to months, not days. From clinical practice, here are the 4 details that make the difference between partial results and transformative ones. First, use high-quality turmeric powder with deep orange-yellow color indicating high curcumin content, not pale yellow powder that's been sitting in your cabinet for 3 years losing potency. Second, don't skip the black pepper, even though it makes the drink slightly spicy. Without piperine, you're wasting 98% of the curcumin. Third, if you're on blood-thinning medications like warfarin, consult your physician because curcumin has mild anticoagulant properties that could potentiate drug effects. Fourth, expect the drink to stain anything it touches, including mugs and teeth, temporarily. Rinse your mouth after consuming. Here are the 5 mistakes that cancel the benefits. First, taking turmeric capsules without piperine or fat. Most commercial supplements are poorly formulated and achieve minimal blood levels. Second, consuming curcumin with large fiber-rich meals. Excess fiber binds curcumin in the gut, preventing absorption. Take it with moderate fat but minimal fiber. Third, using turmeric only occasionally when you remember. Sporadic dosing never achieves the sustained blood levels required for cellular effects. Fourth, expecting vision improvement within days or weeks. Early biochemical changes occur within weeks, but measurable lens clarity improvement takes months. Fifth, continuing high-sugar diets that generate the glycation damage curcumin is trying to prevent. You cannot out-supplement a diet that actively generates the oxidative stress, destroying your lenses. Ifran patram, yisam ins yisam. Your vision is not predetermined. Let me bring it all together clearly. Cataracts are not an inevitable sentence. They are the visible consequence of a specific biochemical failure, the depletion of antioxidant defenses inside lens cells that should be protecting crystalline proteins from oxidative damage. That depletion happens because glutathione production declines with age, recycling enzymes become less efficient, and cumulative oxidative stress from UV light, high blood sugar, and inflammation overwhelms remaining defenses. But your lens cells still possess the genetic capacity to produce glutathione, to recycle oxidized antioxidants, to repair damaged proteins, and to maintain transparency. The machinery exists. The blueprints are still in your DNA. The question is simply whether you provide the molecular signal that activates those protective systems. And curcumin, the golden compound in turmeric that humans have consumed for thousands of years, is that signal. When you consume it daily with black pepper and fat at doses used in clinical trials, curcumin enters your bloodstream, crosses into ocular tissues, penetrates lens epithelial cells, activates NRF2 transcription factors, upregulates glutathione synthesis and recycling, stabilizes crystalline proteins, scavenges reactive glucose metabolites, and enhances DNA repair. These are not theoretical mechanisms. These are measured biochemical events documented in peer-reviewed literature and demonstrated in clinical trials showing actual reversal of lens opacity in human patients. You have far more control over your vision than you've been led to believe. The clouding process can be interrupted. Early damage can be repaired. The systems protecting your lenses can be restored to function. This doesn't require expensive medications or risky procedures. It requires 1 teaspoon of turmeric, a quarter teaspoon of black pepper, and commitment to daily consistency while your cellular repair mechanisms do what they evolved to do when properly supported. Quick favor, could you check right now if you're subscribed to this channel? I see messages from people who've watched multiple videos and didn't realize they weren't subscribed. It's free, takes 2 seconds, and it helps this channel reach more people who need real evidence-based health information instead of surgery-first fatalism. If this information was valuable to you, please share it with someone you care about who's dealing with declining vision or early cataracts. This protocol could save them from unnecessary surgery or years of progressive vision loss. In my next video, I'm breaking down the second most critical nutrient for eye health, one that protects your retina and macula from the oxidative damage that causes age-related macular degeneration. It's another compound most people have access to, but almost nobody consumes in therapeutic amounts. The vision you'll have in 12 months is being determined by what's reaching your lens cells today. You can send the protective signal starting tomorrow morning with ingredients that cost less than your coffee. Your cells are waiting. The genetic machinery is ready. You just have to flip the switch. Dr. Leana out.